Faith has always been complicated for Black people. The religion that was used to justify enslavement also became the source of our survival. The book that slave masters used to keep us docile became the book we use to imagine freedom. Today, we're talking about the gospel of survival and how faith liberates and limits at the same time, about religion, rage, and Black resilience. This is The Third Rail.
Yeah, I am that I am. Oh, I am that I am. Everything was manifested. They wondering how I do it. You wanna know how I do it? I am that I am. It's really that easy. Know who you are when you speak it. Lost in the phone and the TVs. Everything that shine ain't gold. God sees me just for who I am.
Welcome back. This is The Third Rail, Dr. Mark James. Today's episode is about faith, about spirituality, about complex relationship between religion and Black liberation. God is Black. He is symbolically on the side of the oppressed. That's James Cone. James Cone was the father of Black liberation theology. He argued that Christianity, properly understood, is a religion of the oppressed, that Jesus was a revolutionary, that God sides with the poor, the marginalized, the enslaved. It's a powerful reframing, but it's not the only story. Faith has both been on the sides of the oppressed. It's also been a tool of oppression and a weapon of liberation. Today, we're exploring both sides, liberation theology and religious dogma. Let's distinguish between two things. Liberation theology and religious dogma starts like this. Liberation theology starts with the lived experience of the oppressed. It asks, what does faith mean for people who are suffering? How does God speak to those on margins? What does liberation look like in practice? Black liberation theologies, womanist theology, Latin American liberation theology, Palestinian liberation theology, those traditions read the Bible through the eyes of the oppressed. They see Jesus as a revolutionary. They understand salvation is both spiritual and material. Religious dogma is different. Dogma is about rules. It's about hierarchy, about maintaining the status quo. It's about the preacher who tells you to wait for heaven while ignoring the hell you're living in right now. If the churches that condemn the LGBTQ plus community while protecting abusers, it's the theology that tells the oppressed to be patient, to suffer in silence, to wait for their reward in the afterlife. Dogma serves power. Liberation theology serves the people. The difference matters. Let's pause right there. Bob Marley sings a song that speaks about this, speaks about the fact that if you practice your life thinking that heaven is under the ground, you will never live above ground. You'll never truly find out what it means to really live in your faith. Let's talk about the wounds that faith can inflict. Religious trauma is real. It's the shame instilled by purity culture, the fear of hell, the condemnation of who you are. It's the church that told you your natural hair was sinful, that your body was a temptation, that your questions were doubt. It's the spiritual leader who abused their power, who took advantage of your trust, who use God's name to justify their violence. For many Black people, the church was supposed to be a sanctuary, and for many it was. It was the cornerstone. But for some, it was another site of harm, another place where their full selves weren't welcome. It was an act. Healing from religious trauma is possible, but it requires honesty. It requires naming the harm. It requires finding or creating spiritual places that actually nurture your soul. You can love God and be angry at the church at the same time. You could be spiritual and question religion. You can reclaim your faith on your own terms. But let's not forget the power. Faith has always been central to Black resistance. The civil rights movement was rooted in the Black church. The songs, the leadership, the organizing, all of it flowed from spiritual conviction. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. Remember that? MLK was a preacher. The Montgomery boycott was organized in the churches. And it's not just Christianity. African traditional religions have sustained resistance across the diaspora. Voodoo in Haiti, Candomblé in Brazil, Santeria in Cuba. Islam has been a force for Black liberation from the Nation of Islam to Muslim activists today. Spirituality gives us strength. It connects us to something larger than ourselves. It helps us to imagine a world that doesn't exist yet. The question isn't whether faith can be liberatory. It clearly can. It is. It can be. What kind of faith to what end? Let's talk a little bit about when faith becomes a chain. So when does faith become a chain instead of a key? When it asks us to accept the oppression at God's will. When it tells us to wait for heaven instead of fighting for justice now. When it condemns us for being who we are. When it demands our silence and compliance, our suffering. When it serves the powerful instead of the powerless. Faith should expand us. It should challenge us to be more loving, more just, more free. If it's shrinking us, making us smaller, more fearful, more compliant, that's not faith. That's control. And we have the right to walk away from that. We have the right to find or create spiritual practices that actually liberate us. Let's speak about some guiding questions. As we close, sit with these questions. When does faith become a chain instead of a key? How can spiritual practices nurture revolutionary action? What role has faith played in your own resilience? What would liberation spirituality look like for you? The gospel of survival is real, but so is the gospel of liberation. Thank you for joining us for episode 6. Next week, we're talking about emotion, about who gets to feel what in public, about white grief and Black rage. Episode 7, white grief, Black rage, who really gets to feel. This is the third rail, where race, power, and truth collide. I am Dr. Mark James, and it's my pleasure to be here. Ashe, see you next time.
You wanna know how I do it? I am that I. From the heights to the west coast, all this fake recognition gets old. Time to